Hey, it's Mr. Kabbalah here. This is going to be an Algebra 1 video going over the homework from eMath instruction, unit number 9, lesson number 1, square roots and radicals. Hopefully this is a help. Email me or contact me for any questions. Number 1, simplify each of the following. Each will result in a rational number. You can check your work using your calculator, but you should try to do all of these without it. When you find this symbol, this right here, is called a radical. And what we're doing is finding a square root. So we're thinking of a number that times itself gives us what's under the radical. Sometimes they're easy, like these first 8 or so. Other times we probably will have to use a calculator. If there's a negative in front, it typically means we want the negative answer. If we don't see a negative, we typically want the positive answer, although square roots can have both, a positive and a negative, and that's because a negative times a negative is a positive. So for example, the square root of 36, a number that times itself that gives you 36 is 6. So we could either write just 6, you could put the plus minus sign, which is basically a plus and minus stacked on top of each other. So you could write it like that, plus or minus 6. From now on, I'm just going to, if it doesn't have the negative sign, I'm going to just write the number, not positive or negative. I'm just going to write the number. So like for letter B, this would have an answer of -2. Letter C would be 11. If it's a fraction, you basically take the square root of the top, which is 1. You take the square root of the bottom, which is 3. This would be -10. This would be 9/6. Doesn't say to reduce it. If you wanted to reduce it, it would be 3/2. This would be -1/4. Again, I'm putting the negative there because there's a negative on the outside here, which typically means that we're looking for the negative square root. So this would be -12. Now, just to remind you how to do it on your calculator, let's say we want to do the square root of 144. So you'd have to use the second button. And then right down here is a radical symbol above x squared. And it's in blue, so that's why I hit the second button. So square root or radical. You type your number, and then it should give you the answer. So that's again, the square root button on your calculator. Moving on with the homework. Find the final simplified answer to each of the following by evaluating square roots first. If this were a test or a quiz or the Regents, I would just type all of these into your calculator. But let's just practice maybe doing it by hand. This would be 3 plus 5 minus 8. Working left to right, 3 plus 5 is 8, and 8 minus 8 is 0. This would be 5 times the square root of 4, which is 2, plus 2 times the square root of 81, which is 9, which turns into 10 plus 18, which is 28. This would be 2 times the square root of 25, which is 5, plus 2 divided by 3. 2 times 5 is 10. 10 plus 2 is 12. And 12 divided by 3 is 4. Over here, letter D, the square root of 1 is 1. The square root of 4 is 2. So half of the square root of 121 is 11. Square root of 9 is 3. So it's half of 11 minus 3. 11 minus 3 is 8. Half of 8 is 4. All of the square roots so far have been quote unquote nice. We'll discuss what that means in future lessons. For these, the multiplication rule basically says that if both things are underneath a radical, then you can multiply the numbers as if they're normal, and then make sure that you keep them under the radical and then perform the square root from there. They do bring up a vocab word. Radicand is the number underneath the square root symbol. So the multiplication rule says that the square root of 2 times the square root of 50 would be the same as the square root of 100, which is 10. The square root of 3 times the square root of 12 would be the same as the square root of 36, which is 6. The 5 times the square root of 6 times the square root of 24 would be the same as 5 times the square root of 144, which would be the same as 5 times 12, which is 60. This would be 5 minus the square root of 2 times the square root of 8 would be the square root of 16. The square root of 16 is 4, so this would have an overall answer of 1. Square root of a half times the square root of 1/18 would be the same as the square root of 1 times 1 on top. 2 times 8 on the bottom is 36, which would give us a final answer of 1 over 6. This letter F would be 81, square root of 81 over 16, which would be 9 over 4. Again, I would probably, if this were a test, quiz, or Regents, do those on a calculator, but might as well right now practice them by hand. All right, simplest radical form. Now, in the lesson, they might do it differently. How I might do it is go back to 6th grade math and do factor trees. So I'm doing letter B right here. 2 times 10 is 20, and then 2 times 5. So I would write this as 2 times 2 times 5. If there are any ones that are pairs, like 2 times 2, I'd bring that on the outside of the radical, and anything that isn't a pair, I'd leave on the inside. So it would be 2 radical 5. 90 is 9 times 10. That's 3 times 3. This is 2 times 5. So we've got 3 times 3 times 2 times 5. I've got a pair here, so that comes on the outside. And then on the inside of the radical, I'd still have 2 times 5, so this part on the inside, which is 10. Now it does want the negative answer, so negative 3 times the square root of 10. Let me get rid of down here. Erase, 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 erase. Give me a little more room. All right, so now to letter D, we've got 48, which is 2 times 24. That's 2 times 12. That's 2 times 6. And 6 is, 2 times 3. So I have 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 3. I actually have 2 pairs of 2s. So I'm going to bring 1 2 out and another 2 out. Okay, so kind of that one and then that one. And then inside the radical would be 3. And I can perform the 2 times 2, which is 4, and then radical 3. So this would be my final answer right here for letter D. All right, E, I have 8 under the radical, and we're going to have the negative answer. 8 is 2 times 2 times 2. So I have a pair of 2's here. Bring it to the outside of the radical with a 2 on the inside. 300. This is Sparta. That's a movie. Anyway, 3 times 100. 10 times 10. And there are other ways to do these prime factors. This is called prime factorization. You don't have to do 3 times 100. You could do 50 times 6 and still get the same thing. In any case, you get 3 times 2 times 2 times 5 times 5. I know I'm kind of writing messily. I'm sorry. So there's a 2 and a 5 that can be on the outside. The square root of 3 on the inside. I can actually do 2 times 5, which is 10. So 10 square root 3. All right, write each of the following in simplest radical form. So kind of the similar situation here. Notice in the example, if there's something already on the outside, you can then multiply it times whatever you bring out. So in letter B, 45 is 9 times 5, which is 3 times 3 times 5. So there's a pair of 3's that I can bring on the outside. So there's the 4 from the outside. There's the 3 that I brought out. and on the inside I would have radical 5. 4 times 3 is 12, so all in all I have 12 radical 5. 32 is 2 times 16, 2 times 8, 2 times 4, 2 times 2. So this is actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 2's. So I can bring out, because I have 2 pairs of 2's, I can bring out 2 2's and leave 1 2 underneath the radical. So 1/2 times 2 is 1, times the other 2 is 2. So all of this is 2 radical 2. All right, so I'll get rid of this just to, it's working. There it goes. All right, down along the bottom. Switch to this, I'll do those in blue. We have negative 2 times and then 288. 2 times 144. 2 times, is that 72? 9 times 8. 9 is 3 times 3. 8 is 2 times 2 times 2. So we've got 5 total 2's and 2 3's. So 2 2's can come on the outside and a 3 can come on the outside. So 1, 2 2's and a 3. And then there's this spare 2 here underneath the radical. So negative 2 times 2 times 2, that's 8, times 3 is 24. So my answer to letter D I'll put down here would be negative 24 radical 2. For letter E, 108, I'll do 2 times 54. That's 6 times 9. That's 2 times 3, and a 3 times 3. So it's a 2 times 2 times 3 times 3 times 3. I can bring out a 2 and a 3. So 2 times 3, and then a radical 3, all over 3. Now before I multiply the 2 times 3, I can cancel those out. So my answer for letter E, I'll put down here, would all in all be 2 radical 3. All right, and then for letter F, let's see here, where can I go? 320, I'll try to squeeze it in here. Let's do 32 times 10. That's 2 times 16. That's 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. That's 2 times 5. So 320 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 2's and a 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then a 5. So we can bring out 1, 2, 3 2's. 2 times 2 times 2, radical 5. And then again, negative that, all over 16. So my final answer for letter F would be negative. Now, 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. And then I'd have 8 over 16, which means that on top I'd be left with 1. And 1 times radical 5 is radical 5. And on the bottom, I'd be left with 2. So negative radical 5 over 2. You could also have negative 1/2 radical 5. And I think that might bring us to the last section. Okay. Now, this is basically just showing you, like, if we take 28 and do what we just did, 7 times 4 and 2 times 2, okay, that when we actually put in simplest radical form and then perform that on a calculator, I'll show you both. So we're going to do square root of 28, and we get 5.291 and so on. If I do 2 radical 7, I get the exact same decimal. Okay, so it's just showing you that both are exactly the same. They're equivalent numerical expressions. Then it asks us to do this for 80. 80 is 8 times 10. 8, I'm skipping a few steps just to kind of make this not as long. We got 2 times 2 times 2, and then 2 times 5. So 80 is 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 5. So there are 2 sets of 2's, and then a radical 5. So this is 4 radical 5. And just to, again, show you real quick on the calculator, if we do the square root of 80, we get 8.94-ish. If we do, I believe we got, what, 4 radical 5 as our simplified radical expression, we get the exact same thing. Okay, so that is Unit 9, Lesson 1. If you have any questions, let me know. Hopefully this is a little bit of help. Hopefully everyone's doing all right. Hopefully see you soon.